my belief system at a very young age said, hey, man, it's okay to just drink a little beer, smoke a little pot. You're not hurting anybody. You're not even hurting yourself. But, I couldn't have been more wrong, Josh. I was in the early stages of addiction, but our belief systems are so important. I go around America talking about these things because the longer you hold on to a bad belief system, the harder it is to get rid of. And the reality is, Josh, belief systems are hard to change. And a bad belief system usually wins out in the end.
All right, welcome back to Spartan Leadership, everybody. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and I am excited for this morning. I hope you are buckled in because we got the coffee bean himself, Mr. Damon West, with us. He is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, co-founder of the Coffee Bean Foundation, criminal justice professor, and influential leader. If that wasn't enough, the man is just an unbelievable, I think, in my opinion, rising star in the speaking and influencer world in such a positive way because his story is so incredible. So for those of you that haven't heard of him, you are in for a treat today. For those of you that have and have heard him speak, I hope to give you some questions and nuggets from Damon today that you haven't heard in his speeches or his talks before. So with all that said, Damon, welcome to the show, my man.
Josh, man, thanks for having me on, brother. We've been circling around each other for several months now, so it's time we get this done, brother. I mean, I'm excited about this.
Kicking off a Monday morning with your energy, I'm excited. So I want to give a little bit of the backdrop of the story because I know that you'll get into it heavily. But for those that don't know part of Damon's story, so he grew up in, I want to say just Texas, right? You're Texas your whole life.
Yeah,
Yep.
Southeast Texas.
Football is his life in Texas because Texas football is life. So he goes on to play D1 college. An injury ends his career. And I want to get into a little bit of that going from there because he then serves doesn't serve it, but is sentenced to a life sentence in prison. And I'll let him get into some of that story because it really leads us to the coffee bean in and of itself. But you've been such an inspiration to me, man. I can't tell you how excited I am to have my audience hear from you today. So I'll start it off with, I know I started off with football, going into college, and anything that I missed in between there, great, before we get into all the meat and potatoes of this inspirational story.
Yeah, so, Josh, what I would say is that addiction affects every single person in this country, whether you are the addict, the family of an addict, friend of an addict, the victim of an addict, or let's face it, you're just a taxpayer paying into this overburdened criminal justice system that has no idea how to handle the disease of addiction. Addiction affects everybody in this country. But that's why my story, I think, has such an impact in that sense, because everybody understands the disease of addiction one way or another. And my life is like that. I got into addiction at a very young age. I mean, it's something that happened. I started dabbling with alcohol first, and it was smoking marijuana. It seems pretty innocent, right? But it goes into my belief system. And our belief systems are so important in life because they tell us how to respond, how to act, how to do things. My belief system at a very young age said, hey, man, it's okay to just drink a little beer, smoke a little pot. You're not hurting anybody. You're not even hurting yourself. But, I couldn't have been more wrong, Josh. I was in the early stages of addiction. But our belief systems are so important. I go around America talking about these things because, the longer you hold on to a bad belief system, the harder it is to get rid of. And the reality is, Josh, belief systems are hard to change. And a bad belief system usually wins out in the end. And that was the case in my life. And, I went on with a bad belief system and it led to more substance abuse. After I got hurt playing college football in the 90s, my career was over. I got into hardcore drugs at that point. It wasn't just weed, wasn't weed and alcohol. It was cocaine and ecstasy and pills, but I was a functional addict, and I got away with it for a while. I worked very high-level jobs. I worked in the United States Congress. I worked for a guy running for president. I was also in the financial world just like you were. I worked for UBS, United Bank of Switzerland. I was a broker-dealer. But in 2004, another broker introduced me to meth one day. Saw me sleeping at work. Josh, the job. You can't sleep as a broker, man. You got people's money on the line. Markets are open. And he tells me that UBS is going to fire you if they catch you sleeping. So he brings me down to the parking garage, and I take my first hit of methamphetamine, smoke it out of my glass pipe. I've never seen a glass pipe before, Josh, but of course my belief system tells me it's okay to do stuff like this. And I'm Damon West. I can handle this stuff. Dude, it could have been more wrong. It was the fork in the road that changed my life and the lives of so many other innocent people, Josh.
Hey, real quick on that. So I told you a little bit pre-show that I played college football as well. And when I stopped, I didn't have a career-ending injury. I chose to stop, but I still went through a psychological battle of like identity loss.
Sure.
How was that for you? And do you think that was a tipping point when your career was taken away from you? The thing you were known for, the thing that you had thrived on your entire life, was taken away from you so abruptly. Did that play well into part of those addictions, or how did you overcome that identity loss?
1,000% played into it. And here's what I'd say. I made the mistake of wrapping my identity up into something external, right? I mean, we all do this in life sometimes. We identify ourselves by the job we have, the car we drive, the homes we live in, social media. We allow that to identify us. And that's the fallacy that so many of us make, and I'm no different than anybody else, because my identity was wrapped up in being a college football player. And when football was gone from my life abruptly like that, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have a contingency plan on who Damon West was. And now I'm at this fork in the road. Again, I like to talk about fork in the roads. I think they're important in our lives. But I'm at this fork in the road, and I don't even know who I am. My identity is gone, and I cannot deal with life on life's terms. And that's the difference between someone that can handle adversity and someone that cannot handle adversity. And we can handle adversity, we can deal with life on life's terms because we can pivot, we can adapt, we can adjust, we can call an audible at the line of scrimmage, to borrow a football phrase. But I didn't have that. I didn't have any other identity. And when I couldn't deal with life on life's terms, I did what so many other addicts do. I turned to chemicals to change the way I felt.
Yeah. Well, you've gone from being a part of the problem to being a part of the solution, something that society is severely lacking, I believe. And the analogy and where I want to go next is, so you get addicted to meth and you're having a good career in the financial world with UBS. I mean, anytime you land with a Fortune 100 company like that, you have the opportunity to make a lot of money and an impact in people's lives and live, the upper middle class American dream, if you will. But that didn't happen for you. You end up addicted to meth. And tell us a little bit about what happened next.
Yeah, man, it was a crazy fast fall from the top to the very bottom. I mean, I tell people all the time, I went from working on Wall Street to living on the streets of Dallas. I was in Dallas as a broker. He took the first hit of meth. And the next thing that came up is I was getting ready to take my Series 7. And I was getting ready to take my 7, my 63. These are exams, by the way, for all the people listening that don't understand. These are the licensing exams you have to take to be a broker-dealer. And I couldn't pass them. I failed. I actually failed the Series 7, which I don't know that many people even failed that thing. But I was so far gone on this meth that they had to let me go. And once I lost my job, I remember the day the guy brought me in. Charlie Eldemeyer was the guy that brought me in, a family friend. I had been a political fundraiser in politics for a while. And I had this book of business, Josh. I mean, I had millionaires and billionaires that I raised money from politics. And it was just a natural pivot to take this into the world of finance. And Charlie was so, devastated when he brought me in the office that day to tell me I was fired. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I can't wait to get out of this office so I can go get high. I can go see my meth dealer early today. And that's what I was thinking. I get to go see my dealer early today, man. And in my head, I was already calling the guy. Literally before I get out of the building, I'm on my cell phone calling my dealer, telling him I'm coming over. I was excited because I got off work early, permanent. That's the upside down world of meth. And it took me about 18 months to lose it all. Man, my apartment I had in Uptown Dallas, the vehicle I was driving, the everything I had going for me in life was gone. And now I live on the streets. I live in dope houses. I live in drug houses. I sleep in people's cars. I don't have a job. I don't have a home. I started resorting to other crimes to fund my addiction. I become a criminal. Petty crimes at first. I'm shoplifting. I'm breaking into cars. I'm breaking into storage units. Then I start breaking into people's homes. This is a very serious crime. This is the crime of burglary. And a burglary is when I broke into my victim's home, I didn't just steal their property, stole a lot of property during the crime spree known as the Uptown Burglary crime spree. I stole something way more valuable from my victims, Josh. I stole their sense of security. And Josh, I don't know if they can get that back. I really don't. I mean, I've heard from some of my victims at the trial how negatively I impacted their lives. I was a very bad guy. Now, I never physically hurt any of my victims. No one was ever home. I never saw my victims. They never saw me. No weapons were ever used. I went through great pains to make sure that my victims weren't home even. I mean, I didn't want to run into somebody. I had a realization that I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was also in this disease of addiction, and I wanted to get high. So I was willing to go to any lengths to do that. But this Uptown Burglary crime spree went on for about 3 years. It was a game of cat and mouse with the Dallas Police Department. I mean, one of the first places I broke into, Josh, was the United States Post Office, and I stole a mailman bag. And that's how I went around neighborhoods undetected. I went around neighborhoods and condo buildings dressed as the mailman. I mean, you don't know what your mailman is. No one knows what your mailman looks like.
Right.
They could have a different mailman come on each day. So that was one of the tools I used to gain access to a lot of places. And in that dope world, I went from being a homeless dope fiend addict to being a criminal mastermind of a burglary. I went from being the quarterback of a college football team one day to be the quarterback of a gang of thieves that broke into people's homes. And these burglaries went on for about 3 years. They called them the Uptown Burglaries. They called me the Uptown Burglar. Before they even knew who I was the Uptown Burglar. The news story would say the Uptown Burglar struck again, that kind of thing. But on July 30th, 2008, I was sitting on the couch and my world was unraveling. They had just picked up my partner in crime, Dustin. They caught him in a stolen car from one of the burglaries. And so I knew it was just a matter of time before they closed in on me. I had my dope dealer at my apartment. His name is Tex. And I'm sitting on the couch and I'm smoking meth with him and I'm telling Tex, man, dude, the end is near. You don't want to be here right now. And just as I'm passing the pipe back and forth to Tex, the window blows out. The flashbang grenade comes tumbling across the living room floor, blows up in my face. And when I came to, when I can see it here again, there's cops everywhere in this little small apartment. They're coming through the windows. They busted my door off the hinges. And one of them screams out loud, "We got him. We got the Uptown Burglar." And they did, man. And I had no idea that day, July 30th, 2008, I would never see freedom again for another 7 years and 3 months and 18 days. And I tell people all the time, Josh, that SWAT team did not just arrest me that day. They rescued me. They rescued me that day, Josh.
They saved your life.
Yeah, my angels didn't come with wings in life. My angels had assault rifles, shields, and helmets. They came through the windows. They busted out the doors to bring me out of this world that I was in. I really think, honestly, Josh, they were sent by God. And I think that, God has a role for all of us to play in this world. And my role at that time was, hey, Damon West, it's time to pluck you out of this world. And I got a project I'm about to put you on. But this Odyssey is going to send you through hell first to do it. And it was, Josh. It was a living hell. Not just for me, for my family, for my victims, for everybody involved. Because, when you go to prison, you don't just take yourself to prison. You take everybody with you. You take your family. You take your victims. You take everybody around you, your community. And that's what I did. Because addiction is a very selfish thing. Crime is a very selfish thing.
Yeah. Well, it's so powerful. And by the way, that SWAT team wasn't the only angels God sent Damon. And we want to talk about Mr. Jackson. Before we get to Mr. Jackson, though, and tee up the coffee bean story, your mother and the story you told about her in the courtroom after you were sentenced, I don't want to miss that at all because it's so powerful and how it tees up how your mindset was approaching prison. So can you tell what your mother said to you after your sentence?
Yeah, that's such a key part of the story. I'm glad you asked that, Josh. So I was arrested on July 30th, 2008. Within 10 months, they had already taken me to trial. And this is like fast. That's like a rocket docket that I was on. Dallas County had me in custody. They set my bond at $1.4 million. $1.4 million bond. Josh, there's 9,000 people in Dallas County jail. Not one other person in that jail system, murderers, child molesters, rapists, killers. No one had a $1.4 million bond but me, because Dallas County was going to make an example out of me. They had me in custody. The Uptown Burglar was not who they thought it was. They thought it was different groups breaking in. They had no idea. It was this white, middle-class guy that was college educated, the college quarterback. They brought him into a trial. The trial lasted 6 days. 6 days is a long trial for crimes where no one got hurt, right? The jury went to deliberate after 6 days. They went to deliberate for 10 minutes. I mean, this jury was ready to get rid of me. And the jury came back with a life sentence, 65 years, 65 in Texas is life. And as soon as the trial was over, they're rushing me up to the courtroom in handcuffs. They're dragging me out of there. They put me in this little side room. They tell me to wait. A few minutes later, they bring my mom and my dad into this little side room. It's a bulletproof glass between us. And my mom has this conversation with me. She's telling me that debts in life demand to be paid. And she said, you just got hit with a hell of a bill from the state of Texas, but you owe the debt to Texas. And we just saw in the court, you owe that debt to Texas. You have to go pay that debt. She said, but you owe your father and I debt too, because we gave you all the opportunities, love and support to be anything you want to be in life. She said, so here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type of gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority. She said, it's not going to work. You were never raised to be a racist, and you're not going to start now. She said, you will not get any tattoos while you're inside that prison. She says, no gangs, no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised, or don't come back at all. Now, Josh, I'm stunned. Oh, Lord, my mom, who loves me more than anybody in the world, has this maternal love for me, has just told me that I can't get into a gang. I can't get involved in the world in there. And honestly, I don't know how I'm going to survive, because everybody in Dallas County Jail that I'm talking to, in the 2 months following that conversation, I'm waiting for the prison bus to come pick me up, and everybody I'm talking to, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they're all telling me the same thing. You have to get into a gang. I cannot survive what I'm going into without a gang, because in there, I'm going where the lifers go. I'm going to the worst part of the prison system, by the way, because I just got life. I have to get into a gang. But there was this one guy, and this older black man named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, as you referred to a while ago, was an angel. He was like an angel to me. He was a real person, but he's like one of these people that God puts on your path of life. And I tell people all the time, Josh, God never just reached his hand down on my head and said, Damon, you're healed. Man, God's always put people in my life. These people come in different forms. And one of them was this black Muslim man in Dallas County Jail who shared with me the realities of prison. And he's not sugarcoating. He's telling me, man, you got to go in and you fight all the white gangs first, because you're white. If you want to be independent, you have to fight the white gangs. Then you'll fight the black gangs. And after that, you'll earn the right to walk alone. And he tells me, you don't have to win these fights. You just have to fight these fights. And I remember thinking, man, that's profound, man.
It's
you
so
don't have
profound.
to win your fights. You just have to fight your fights. But I mean, nothing's truer in life, Josh. You don't have to win. No one expects you to win all your fights in life. No one is that good, man. You just got to keep getting back up. And when he's telling me this back in 2009, I remember I'm looking back at this guy like a deer in headlights, man. All this violence and terror I'm about to walk into. And that's when he's like, let me break it down for you a different way. And he says, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put into this pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in the pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. And so he shares the story with me. He said, if I put a carrot in the pot of boiling water called prison, the carrot turns soft. Goes in hard, but turns soft, mushy, weak. The carrot gets beat, it gets robbed, make it kill. He said the egg in the same pot of boiling water goes in with a soft liquid inside. The outer shell protects the inside of the egg, but inside the egg becomes hard. The heart becomes hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hard, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. He said, if you're incapable of giving or receiving love in the world you're about to go into, you're institutionalized and you don't come back as someone your parents recognize, because your eggshell has swastikas tattooed all over it. But then he told me the most important element in that pot of boiling water was the coffee bean, because the coffee bean in the same pot of boiling water doesn't get changed by the water. It changes the water. Changes the water to a pot of coffee. The coffee bean, he said, was the change agent, because the power was inside the coffee bean to change the environment around the coffee. And only when the water got the highest, when the pressure was the highest, could the coffee bean perform its job and do its best? And that's what he told me. Be a coffee bean. Josh, man, I remember thinking, oh my God, I can wrap my brain around that. And it's the truth. That's why the power of the story, it's spreading around the world right now. And I'm so fortunate to be the one to go around telling it, because we can understand that. Anybody from 5 to 95 years old understands these 3 different elements in a pot of boiling water. But we also understand that if a guy could go into the biggest pot of boiling water there is, a maximum security level 5 penitentiary, and level 5, I always emphasize that because that's the highest level of security there is in Texas prisons. It's where the lifers have to go. If I could take that message inside that pot of boiling water and transform that pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee, then you could do it out here in your world too.
Yeah. It's so simple, yet so profound. You're so right. And as we're both sipping on coffee this morning.
Absolutely.
Before I get into the prison questions, does Mr. Jackson know, was he able to live long enough to see even some of your story getting out of prison? Does he know the impact that he's had on the world because of you telling this story, writing this book, speaking on stages, speaking in locker rooms? Was he able to know even a little bit?
Terrific question, Josh. And it's the most frequent question I've gotten. I've been speaking now I got out of prison, just to jump ahead the little story a little bit. I got out of prison November 16th, 2015 on parole. We'll get to all that. But since I got out, I've been going around sharing the coffee beans. And I've tried to find this guy. And his name is not Mr. Jackson. I gave him that name.
Yeah, I knew that.
I didn't know his real name. The only name I knew this guy by in Dallas County Jail was Muhammad. And the reason why his name was Muhammad is because these guys that go into prison and convert to Islam, they give up their government name, their real name. My government name is Damon West, right? I don't know what his real name was. He only went by the name Muhammad, kind of like Cassius Clay. Yeah, Cassius Clay went to prison in the 1960s and he came out Muhammad Ali. So aside from even knowing his real name, I went to Dallas County Jail when I first got out trying to find my friend Muhammad. They said, we can't find him without a birthday or a real name. So I gave him the name Mr. Jackson because I live in the South. I just know that I can't go around the South just out of prison telling people that Muhammad told me this and Muhammad told me that. Yeah. I mean, it literally would resound with a thud in the rooms I was going into. So I gave him the name Mr. Jackson. But I kept searching for him, hoping to find him with no luck until this summer when I got a letter from an inmate at Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I get a lot of letters from inmates now. And this letter was unique in the sense that it had no return address and it only had one sentence in the letter. And it said, find James Lynn Baker and you find Mr. Jackson. So this is a clue. And the only thing I knew about James Lynn Baker, what I knew about Mr. Jackson, who was James Lynn Baker, I found out, by the way, is that he told me he was from Dallas and in and out of prison all of his life. You know, he was there on a parole violation. So I go to Dallas, which is 6 hours away from where I live. I get a private investigator involved and I'm like, hey, we got to find this guy. First thing the PI finds is his criminal record. Matches up everything he said, in and out of prison all of his life. He was in there on parole violation in 2009. At the same time I was in Dallas County Jail. So I know for sure this is my guy and I can't wait to meet my guy again. But I never got a chance to meet Mr. Jackson again because Mr. Jackson, James Lynn Baker, died May 9th, 2017. 5.5 years ago, he died of an opiate overdose. You see, again, he's a drug addict just like me, but he never got into a program recovery. He never got help for his addiction and he died. He killed it. So now that I found out who he was, I told the PI, let's go find his family because I've got an idea. I got to do something to honor this guy. That's what integrity is. I've got to do the right thing. Yeah. Found his family. This is where it gets crazy, Josh. His sister was the first Dallas Cowboy cheerleader ever. In 1972, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader started out with 7 women. His little sister, Vontiel Baker, is the first Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. He has another little sister named Vanessa Baker that becomes a Cowboy cheerleader. But the real history maker in his family wasn't his sisters, it was his mother. Bertha Baker, in 1949 in Dallas, Texas, became the first licensed black daycare owner in the city of Dallas. The first daycare license to a black resident went to their mother, who started a daycare out of the home he grew up in. The home he grew up in, Josh, is a city landmark in the city of Dallas. It's a protected structure in Dallas. And then I'm like, I am floored at this point. This is my guy, and these are his people. So I reached out to the family. He has 3 living sisters, Visha, Von Seal, and Vanessa Baker. And I told them the story about how I met their brother in 2009 in Dallas County Jail, and the message that he transferred to me and what I've done with the message since then. And that, I didn't know what their feelings were about their brother and the choices he made in life, but I needed them to know that he impacted at least one life on this planet. And that one life is trying to impact the entire planet with the message that he gave me. And that's when I asked the sisters, where did y'all go to high school? And they confirmed that what he told me, that he was from the inner city. They went to Dallas Lincoln High School. Dallas Lincoln, very inner city part of Dallas, very urban, very black part of Dallas. And I said, great. Here's what I would like to do. I'd like to put $10,000 a year into a trust for the James Lynn Baker II via Coffee Bean Scholarship, available only to kids that graduate from Dallas Lincoln High School. So that children that grow up in his neighborhood and go to his high school will have a better chance at life through education, because these 2 men had this chance encounter for about 7 weeks in Dallas County Jail in the summer of 2009. And I mean, dude, the family's on board. They're so excited. The scholarship went live a couple weeks ago. Kids are already applying to it. And in May, the first recipient of the James Lynn Baker II via Coffee Bean Scholarship will be awarded a $10,000 scholarship to the school of their choice.
Man, that is so good.
Isn't it wild?
I'm so glad we went there. It actually makes me emotional too, because it's just like so many things that lined up. Hey, you're such a good human being. Now, I know you said before, right, that you were not a good human. I want to affirm, and everyone, no one is below being redeemed. Damon is proof of that. James Lynn Baker is proof of that, right? Even though, think about this, an addict in and out of life, or in and out of prison all his life, has the impact on someone that is literally affecting millions. The ripples on that.
Absolutely. It's mind-boggling. The book, The Coffee Bean, John Gordon and I wrote the book, The Coffee Bean, in the summer of 2019 is when it came out. And the summer of 2009 is when James Lynn Baker, Mr. Jackson, tells me the story of the Coffee Bean in Dallas County Jail in 2009. 10 years later, almost exactly 10 years later, the book, The Coffee Bean, comes out. John Gordon and I write it. It becomes a bestseller. And Josh, it gets a global publishing deal attached to it. The book, The Coffee Bean, the story that James Lynn Baker told me in Dallas County Jail in the summer of 2009 is now translated into Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, French, Italian, German. It's in every language in the world. Every library in the world has that book on their shelves from the story this guy told me in Dallas County Jail. Imagine the ripples of that, man. This is something that's gone around the entire planet. I've gone all over the planet to share this message too, but it's because this man in Dallas County Jail saw something in me and shared with me a message that was given to him, a message that, this is like you talk about wheels within wheels, about the craziness of this thing. He had this message the entire time. Even if we have the right messages in life, if we don't have the right belief system and the right tools to apply the message, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You've got to have the whole package to make it all work. You can have the answers, but do you apply the answers in your own life? And as an addict, it becomes very difficult, even when you know what the right thing to do is, to do the right thing, because the disease of addiction is so controlling. And he never could break the cycle of addiction, but he saw something like a baton that he passed off to another addict that was going through something very serious. One of the first questions I asked the sisters, where did he hear the story of the Coffee Bean? And their answer was it had to be their grandmother, because their grandmother always shared these little stories like that. My next question was he raised around were y'all raised around white people? And Visha, one of the sisters, was like, that's a very interesting question, Damon. Why would you ask that? And I said, well, because prison, jail was all about race. In fact, their brother, James Lynn Baker, told me that. He told me prison's all about race, and that race is the big dynamic in there. And I said, it's all about race in there. He's a Muslim guy. I'm a Christian. He's a black guy. I'm a white guy. He's older. I'm younger. We've got no business even in the same conversations in Dallas County Jail. But he sought me out, and they said, yes, we were raised around white people, and here's why. Their mother that started the daycare out of their house their mother bought an abandoned hospital, and she converted part of it to a daycare, and the other part of the abandoned hospital was converted to a boarding house. And in this boarding house was in the black part of Dallas, and poor white families that couldn't even afford to be in the white part of Dallas would live in their boarding house. And these white families would bring their white children with them. And they lived around James Baker and their sisters. They grew up around white kids in this boarding house. The only house in the neighborhood, by the way, that had white families was their house. When he was 9, they grew up Lutheran. He didn't convert to Islam until he got to prison. The rest of the family's Christians, but they were Lutheran growing up. And when James was 9 years old, a new pastor came to their Lutheran church in the black part of town that was a white guy, brought his white family with him. In fact, other white families started joining their church. They had one of the only integrated churches in South Dallas. In fact, to this day, Josh, you could look at churches all over America. Religion self-segregates in America. We do this a lot. You see it all the time. But in 1959, a white pastor came in with his white family and brought other white families with him, and he was raised around white people. So race was not a factor for him like it was for everybody else. So much so that he could explain to me the dynamics of what I was going into, and he wasn't jaded by a system that he was caught up in his entire life that disproportionately locks up black people. I mean, he was someone that I think the whole thing about, not to get too deep into God in this conversation, but imagine the thing that God is doing in this guy's life when he's 9 years old, or when he's a child, his family. It's going to play into my life when I meet him in 2009. Everything is connected, Josh. Every single thing in the world is connected.
In fact, you talk a lot about that as energy, because we are energy beings, and that's the story of the coffee bean and infecting in a positive way the boiling water around you. So we got less than 10 minutes, so I want to finish up the story real quick. You go through 2 months of essentially beatings, right? Because you say you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights, and you fought all your fights. And I think you said you lost 90% of them, correct?
Yeah, 75% of my fights, man. I probably got in 3 dozen fights those first 2 months, and I lost 75% of those fights, Josh. I got my butt kicked all over that prison, man. But I didn't go in with the expectation I had to win. This is the difference. This is a new belief system, right? I believe I can do this because I know that I'm going to lose someday. And it's okay to lose, but I know that I have to get back up. And that's what I just kept doing. Without him telling me that, I go into this thing, and how many losses does it take before you give up, right? 2, 5, 10? Man, I got over 20 to my belt, but I just kept getting back up because I knew I didn't have to win all these fights. It serves me well in life now. I get my butt kicked all the time out here in the free world. That's okay. I know I don't have to win. So, yeah, it was tough, man. Prison was hard at first.
But then you earn your independence, you become the coffee bean, you start studying, just pouring into books, pouring into yourself, becoming a recovering addict that continued to pour into that program and the 12-step program that's led you to where you are today. And again, for those that don't know, you are still checking in with sponsor. You're still checking in with parole officer. Tell us a little bit more about that. And then I want to get into, in our last few minutes, your belief in preaching on your secret to life and servant leadership.
Yeah. So I made parole on November 16, 2015. Walked out of a Texas prison, not free, because I'm not free, Josh. I'm on parole until the year 2073. 51 more years on parole, which means every month I see my parole officer, Ms. Braggs here in Beaumont. I pay a fine. Got to get permission from Texas to leave the state of Texas. I'm about to go on a trip this week, and I'll be in 5 different states, and I had to get 5 different permits to do it. But I'm not worried about parole. Parole is just about following the rules. Everybody in life is on parole, right? I just don't have another second chance. I don't get a third chance in life. If I violate my parole, I go back to prison. I work a program recovery, AA. I don't speak for AA, but I'm in AA. It's my 12-step program recovery. Long ago, 2 years after I got out of prison, parole told me that I was no longer required to bring my AA sign-in sheets. Used to be when I first got out, I had to have sign-in sheets to prove I was going to meetings. It told me you don't have to go to meetings anymore. You don't have to bring a sign-in sheet. I'm like, tell my PO, if I quit going to meetings, I'm going back to prison. And she's like, you get it. Just keep working your program. And that's my program recovery, Josh. In a program recovery, the core tenet of being an AA is service to others, service work. And servant leadership is the secret sauce in life. It's how I've built this new life. And it's how I think other people can build whatever life they want to live. When we get out of the mode of serving ourselves and we look at serving other people, helping other people reach their goals in life, helping to raise other people to a different station of life, that's when we truly start living our lives, because that is what our purpose is in life, is to help other people reach their goals in life. And so that's what my life is today, largely being a servant leader.
That's awesome. How does it heal hurt, overcome adversity, and build unity? Because I've heard you speak to those things through servant leadership.
Yeah. And so when we become servant leaders, we become less selfish and we become more selfless. And doing that causes us to become a humble person. And humility is when we are right sized, because humility allows us to listen to difficult truths and be able to hear things that we may not even want to hear, but we have to be humble in our lives because we have to be the right size to be useful to other people. And that was the thing Parole asked me, if you could be remembered for being anything in life, Damien, what would that be in just one word? My one word was useful, because I just want to be useful in this life. So humility allows me to be useful again. And grace is the other secret ingredient to that. To heal hurt, overcome adversity. Grace is when you give somebody something they do not deserve. And grace is a very difficult thing. Grace is getting something you don't deserve. Justice is getting what you do deserve. Justice was me going to prison. I deserve to go to prison for the crimes that I committed or violating the social contract. But getting grace is what I've gotten when I've been out of this free world now, when everybody has shown me so much grace. Grace is hard, Josh, because it always costs the person giving it more than it costs the person who receives it. But when we can live in a world with grace, we let go of resentments. Resentments hold us back at life. A resentment is when you hate or hurt over something that somebody's done to you and you can't let it go. It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It's poisonous to eat you up from the inside out, because the person or group or place or political party you resent usually doesn't have a clue that you resent them, so it doesn't bother them. And many times when they find out you do resent them, they don't care. A resentment eats you up from the inside out. And it's this thing, we have to let go of resentments. We have to show humility and grace in all of our endeavors. And that's how we come together as a group of people and as a nation.
Yeah, that right there was for me today, brother. Thank you. And I got so many more questions, but I know you got to go, and I'm so grateful for your time today. Last thing I want the audience to hear from you are, I believe it's the 4 rules of the coffee bean. I just want you to summarize 5 rules. So summarize those real quick for everyone.
But you knocked out one of them, so there's only 4 left. There's have positive body language everywhere you go. Use your smile. Your smile is powerful. Work out on yourself every day in 3 areas: spiritually, mentally, physically. Every day you should be exercising your mind, your body, your soul. The 3rd rule is what we just covered: servant leadership. It's the secret to life. The 4th rule: controlling the controllables. There are 4 things you have control over in this life. It took me going to prison to understand this. I had to be stripped of everything, especially my ego and my pride, to know that I control what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do. And that's it. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. And the last rule about being a coffee bean, it's that your past does not define you. I don't care what you've done, where you've been, where you were from. That's not you. That's an event that happened in life, and that's in your rearview mirror. Face that windshield, live in the present, live in the moment. Your past is your lesson, the present is a gift, and the future is your motivation, Josh.
Hell yeah. Amen, brother. Well, where can everyone follow you, so that whether they want to book you, follow you, get inspired by you, what's the best spots?
Absolutely. You want to book me to speak, you check me out, damonwest.org, DAMONWST.org, Instagram and Twitter at DamonWest7. And of course, all my books can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. John Gordon and I have a new book coming out February 1st, How to Be a Coffee Bean, the 111 Principles of Being a Coffee Bean.
Cannot wait for that. Both of you are amazing human beings, having a huge impact, not only in my life, across the world, brother. I really appreciate your time today. Everyone, please share this episode. Damon's message needs to be heard. I'm surprised if anyone else hasn't heard it yet. I will listen to it over and over again. It is that powerful. Again, simple, yet so profound. Until next time, remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.